Shane Foss, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Oh, thank you, Jonathan. Really looking forward to joining you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have the chance to talk with you today. I'm excited to have this conversation. We're going to be focusing today on something that I think is very timely and important for every organizational leader to consider right now after we've gone through this year-long pandemic situation and this difficult context that we've all been a part of. And that is building and motivating your team during times of uncertainty. Now, certainly that doesn't apply exclusively to the pandemic. There's disruptions and uncertainty around us all the time, and that's going to be with us long after we've gotten everything under control with the pandemic situation and people are vaccinated and things kind of open back up. But the reality is uncertainty is one of the most certain things that we have in life. We know that change is constant, and we know that there will be disruption. And so we need to figure out how we can best manage and facilitate organizational success within that context. So that's what we'll be exploring together today. As we get started, I just wanted to share Shane's bio with everybody. Shane Foss built himself into the business leader and innovator he is today through more than 20 years of tenure as an executive in the medical industry. With humble beginnings at the University of the Incarnate Word, Shane would go on to earn an MBA from Rice University with lessons that would last him a lifetime. A veteran of the United States Air Force, where he completed a surgical technologist certificate, Shane would use his love of medicine to fuel his venture into the private sector. Placed in notable leadership roles such as the chief commercial officer of ProNerve, the chief financial officer of Employer Direct Healthcare, and partner at Castle Development Group, he'd worked to negotiate complex multi-million-dollar contracts, work in device sales management, create business strategies, and optimize P&L before starting his own business targeting affordable healthcare named Hooray Health. At Hooray Health, Foss and his team focus on offering peace of mind to lower income individuals and families who face medical challenges, while also providing business owners with an affordable way to reward and retain employees. Again, it is a real pleasure to have you, Shane. I think it's incredible what you've done in your career, and I look forward to exploring this topic with you today. Before we launch in, anything else you would like to share by way of background, personal context that kind of would then lead us into our conversation?
Yeah, no, the only thing I would say is, I think what you do, like for young people listening, is, how you start your career certainly isn't how you end your career. But, what happens in between, you just got to take everything as a learning experience and enjoy it. And just know that, you're going to constantly grow. And if you have that attitude, you're going to do fine.
Yeah, well, I love that. I think that's a great foundation, a great way to start this conversation. It speaks to me of a growth mindset where you just have a lifelong learning paradigm and recognize that, that life is going to throw stuff at you that you can't even predict. And we got to learn how to be flexible and roll with the punches and learn and grow. And if we kind of have that flexibility built into our approach to life, then we'll be just fine. And we will have opportunities to pivot and to go in new directions. And my experience has been that most of the time, while I have not had a linear path, few people have had a, directly linear upward path and, through their career. We zigzag and we go in different directions. And at times where I felt disappointment because things didn't work out the way I'd hoped or the way I had planned, in hindsight, as I look back years later, usually it actually ended up working out much better than what I had even hoped for originally. So, we just need to be open to it. We need to be patient. We need to grow into new roles and opportunities, and we'll be in good shape in the long run.
Yeah, well, I think that that flexibility goes really with our topic today, which is, managing through difficult times. Having the mindset and the flexibility to be positive and to understand what the issue is, and then being able to communicate that with your team, I think is key to success there.
Yeah, absolutely. So understanding that, kind of doing all of this in a context of uncertainty is the backdrop to our conversation. Let's start by talking about building successful teams,
Sure.
because I think there's a lot of principles that we can follow. I mean, there's no one size fits all approach to how to put together a successful team, but there are consistent principles and things we should keep in mind as we start to establish. And you've done that in your own career and with your
Hmm.
company, putting
Yeah.
together a winning team to help you be successful. So how did you approach it? Starting from scratch, trying to put together this effective team that can work together.
Well, any entrepreneur will tell you that it's the most challenging and most important job that you're going to have. For me, I've been very lucky that over the course of my career, I've made such good friends and worked with wonderful people that I was able to bring a few of them with me on this journey with me with Hooray. But when you're looking at your team, it's really, I think there's a couple things. Is first of all, anybody that tells you that they hire 75% workout and blah blah blah, it's all BS. I'm just going to tell you, I think probably the most humbling thing that I've ever been through is the hiring process. And it is, man, a lot of times, you're shooting at, less than 50%. And that's really good. And I think that the biggest thing is when you're looking at hiring, really identifying what you really need, what skill sets you need. So, and what I mean by that is, and I'll give you a great example is, so we have a CFO role that we had to fill, and I'm a small company, we're a startup, so I can't, the right person is not a CFO that's been at a multi-billion-dollar organization that has always had excess money and never had to worry about raising money, and that's not who you want. So me finding somebody that is incredibly smart, that has the skill set from a financial planning and financial reporting, and is one thing. But then I've got to have somebody that is really willing to take a risk, somebody that understands raising money, understands budgeting, understands how to communicate with people, hire teams. I mean, it's a completely different skill set. So I think first is really identifying who you need, and what skill sets they need to have, and then going from there, and then being patient in the process. Unfortunately, it, I think the if I could say one thing about people that aren't successful in hiring is that they're not patient. For every single salesperson I've hired, I interview at least 10, if not 20 people, and then I get multiple people to interview them, and then that way you get multiple perspectives, and then you can collectively choose who you think is going to be successful. Because if you bring other people in, they've got ownership in making that person successful. And so hiring is definitely a challenge and an art, but I would think really understanding what you need, and then understanding that you need to be patient in that process are two keys that really I live by.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And it probably sounds like obvious and overly simplistic to just say know what you need, but the number of times I've talked to leaders who think they need one thing, and
Mhm.
but they really need something completely different, or they're just they're resurrecting an old job description that maybe they used the last time they hired someone 3 years ago, and so they just post the same thing that they used without updating it. That happens a lot.
Right.
Or
Yeah.
you have to know what your actual objectives are, what you're trying to accomplish, and what the ideal composition of this team would be with the right skill sets and competencies. You have to be very clear-eyed about that. Otherwise, you're going to go after the wrong people, and you can have a really thorough process of screening and vetting and interviewing. But if you're targeting the wrong type of person through that process, once they get on your team, it's not going to work out, and it's not going to be a fit for them or for you, and they're not going to
Right.
last, right?
Right.
As you were describing that, I was thinking of the old Ocean's 11 movie, if you recall, with George Clooney and Brad Pitt. And
Right.
there's a scene towards the beginning of the movie, right after they talk to the rich, the millionaire casino dude, and they're trying to get funded to do their heist. And then they go out and they start to identify who's going to be members of their team. And
Right.
and it's actually a really fun clip from an organizational and HR perspective, because obviously this is for something they're going to be going to rob casinos. It's illegal,
Right.
but they're being very thorough and thoughtful about exactly what they need, why they need it, who's available, how are they going to fit together. And if you watch it from that lens, this 10-minute clip is like a case study of exactly
Right.
what you should be doing in putting together a really great team for a
Right.
startup venture. So I really love that. And it speaks to exactly what you were just describing. It sounds obvious, but it's not. It's easier said than done to actually be clear-eyed and identify what you actually need within your organization. And so many
Right.
people get sucked into the trap of like you were just saying, you need a CFO. Well, okay, let's go hire for someone who came from a top 10 school, who has XYZ experience at top corporations or whatever. And you start to get sucked into this false sense of security around credentials and experience that doesn't actually necessarily translate over to what you actually need in the organization at this point in time. And that takes a
Right.
level of self-acknowledgement, like self-reflection, and perhaps being aware of your own personal biases, in order to acknowledge that and to be able to set those things aside so you can actually get who you need, and not be distracted by the shiny lights of maybe a degree from an Ivy League or whatever. Maybe you do hire someone who
Right.
went to an Ivy League, or someone who had experience at a great corporation, but that in and of itself that's not the reason, and that's not what you'd be looking for.
Sure. Absolutely.
So you put all this focus, this effort into getting the team together. And let's assume we're successful and we get a really great team
Mm-hmm.
pulled together. We have the right people. And as Jim Collins says, you get the right people in the right seats on the bus so you can move forward. How, at that point, do you continually motivate them and help them to form a cohesive group that can work well together? That's hard to do in the most kind of predictable times, but when you're in a startup, that's an uncertain kind of a situation, and you layer that on top of being in the middle of a pandemic. That's a ton of uncertainty. How have you worked to motivate your team in that kind of a situation?
Yeah. So, communication, obviously Zoom, being on video with everybody, it's not the same as being together, but, just communicating, letting people know what's going on, and depending on what level, right? So if you look at our executive team, all of us, we're talking and collaborating on a daily basis, right? And I think communication is always number one, right? So when you start talking about setting expectations, got one-on-ones with everyone on my team every week, and you're on those calls. It's part of it's business, but part of it is relationship building. And me, I've been in sales my whole life, and so I understand that 99% of everything is relationship based, right? And so from a motivation standpoint, you can get in the trap of where you got to pay everybody, the top salaries. You can have all the bonuses and everything. That's part of it. But the bottom line is they want to work with people that they like. They want to work with people that they've got skin in the game, right? Our whole leadership team, everybody's got skin in the game. So it's that's obviously a motivation. But again, it still boils down to, do you have the personal relationship with your team? Do they believe that you really care about them? And, and it's one thing to say it, but it's another thing to, show up at, a parent's funeral, to show up, when they need you. Right. And that's what, for me, our team is really a family, and, families don't always get along. Right. But it's okay. And, I think one of the things too is with a high performing organization, it's your decision is not the ultimate decision all the time. Right. I mean, it's, taking feedback and understanding. And, you know, for me, especially with a startup, what I needed people that were self-motivated, that were, forgive my French, but get shit done people. Right. They want to get stuff done. It's not hey, should I really do this? No, it's hey, Shane, this is what we really need to do. And then it's making the decision and then executing. I have some people on my team that I literally have the best leadership team that I've ever had in my 30 plus years leading teams. I've got the best team I've ever had. And so, when you look at operations, when you look at, from a sales operations, from you look at a client operations, you look at sales, I've got the best team I've ever had from a CFO standpoint. And so, it's really, people at that level, they don't want a lot of instruction per se, right? They want, hey, aim the ship, and then we're going to paddle, or we're going to get the sails up, and we're going to get it done, right? We're going to swab the decks. We're going to make sure this stuff is clean. And so, my job is really, from a motivating factor, is understanding what motivates them. And what motivates my team, 99.9% of them, is they want to do their job really, really well. And they want the autonomy to learn and continually grow. And that's what we offer.
Well, that's excellent. And what you're describing there is the opposite of a micromanaging, controlling kind of a style that you see in a lot of
Right.
organizations. It's actually one of the nice things of the startup environment. Oftentimes, because it's just a startup, you're bootstrapping everywhere. Everyone's just working hard. There's lots of energy, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't have time or the ability or the expertise to micromanage what everyone else is doing, right? So you get good people,
Right.
you trust them, you give them autonomy, and you unleash them and then support them in doing really great things. And I think
Right.
sometimes that starts to get sucked out of organizations as they grow and mature and get more established, and you start to add more bureaucracy and
Oh yeah.
more red tape, and I think that's partly a natural process that organizations go through, but it's one of the reasons why I like being involved in more entrepreneurial endeavors, because I want autonomy. Me as a worker and as an employee, I want autonomy. As a leader, I want to
Yep.
give people autonomy. I want to
Right.
approach them from a standpoint, like a starting point of trust. And I feel like if I can't do that, either because they want to be told everything to do, or because I feel like I have to tell them everything to do, then that's not going to lead to a high functioning, high impact team, right? And good outcomes for the
No,
organization.
what it does is it does the exact opposite, right? So what happens is I worked with a group where I bought a business, but we were a distribution arm for a large organization, and they had just brought in a bunch of GE people in the senior leadership. And oh my gosh, I've never, like, literally, they wanted to tell me how to uh, do everything and what I was doing all day, and I was like, wait a second, you know, you know, just give me the guidance, right? Hey, this is the route we want to go as an organization, and let's get us there, right? And that's not, it was too much. Hey, we need to have a meeting to plan the next meeting to plan the next meeting, right? And then there was this report and this, and one time I told him, I was like, we're spending so much of our time building reports to talk about what we should be doing, right? I mean, it makes no sense. And then, you get this vicious cycle, and then people aren't performing, and then they're scared to do anything. And it's like, oh my God, I mean, it was too much. And, you know, I think the biggest mistake leaders do, you know, in their organizations is when people make mistakes, they just crucify them, right? And it's just, and I'm the exact opposite. I'm like, okay, all right, if this was a big mistake, how do we fix it? But let's make sure you learn from it, right? If you don't learn from it, then we've got an issue. But, you know, letting people make mistakes, it's okay, right? I mean, but let's acknowledge it, let's learn from it and move on. And that's how you grow, right? But you know, I've been in organizations that love that. I mean, I was with Stryker Orthopedics forever, best organization I've ever worked with. And they were fantastic. You know, you make a mistake, it's like, okay, guys, hey, so you made a mistake. Here's, you know, here's the consequence. Here's how do we fix it? How do we do this? And then you don't do it again, right? And they support you, and you know, that's all. It's all, you know, and you grow and you do better. And then I was with another organization that wasn't like that. And it was, you know, it was, you know, your credibility was shot, and you're like, wait a second, you know, it's just, yeah, it's crazy. So I think, you know, letting people fail, giving them the autonomy to make mistakes. But, you know, you as a leader, you've got to make sure that they're learning from those mistakes and they're not repeating those mistakes. And, you know, there's not purposeful ignorance going on there, right? That they're learning from it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said. Well, Shane, it has been a real pleasure talking with you today. The time has flown by, and as I note the time,
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
realize we probably need to wrap up. But I did want to make sure I gave you a chance before we close to share with listeners how they can get connected with you, how they can find out more about your company, and then give us the last
Yeah,
word on the
absolutely.
topic for today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. You can find us at www.hoorayhealthcare.com. If you want to get in touch with us, you can find me on LinkedIn, Shane Foss. And last word of the day is patience. You know, it is definitely a marathon. It's probably more like an ultra marathon, and that's with your career. That's just with life. That's just with, you know, with anything you're doing, especially hiring. But know what the problem is, communicate it, and let your team fix it.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you, Shane. It has been a real pleasure.
All right, thanks, Jonathan.
I
Pleasure.
encourage listeners to reach out, get connected with Shane, find out more about what he and his organization can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.